We learned how to do basic news writing, the pyramid. Now it's taking another step in this process, getting a little more complicated, a little more sophisticated with writing styles. That's what this chapter is about. All right, so let's kind of go through expanded news writing. All right, things we're going to learn in this lesson. Uh, Basically, we're going to learn story structure, expanding on the pyramid, trying to find a few other ways to write a good news story, be a little more descriptive and a little deeper in our stories, and because not all your stories are going to be short and to the point. Some need some setup, some need some reason for the people to care, and being able to describe things and write in a descriptive manner can set up those stories much better and give more sense to the brevity of a situation or why people should care. All right, next one is we're going to compare the inverted pyramid to the narrative and nonlinear styles. And nonlinear is a whole other way of presenting news, and it's done in the on a web-based format and writing a narrative opening and using NutGraph and understanding using secondary senses to augment your approach. This is one of the big things I talked about when I'm asking you who to with those bonus questions. Are you paying attention? To be a journalist, you have to be able to use all your senses. You have to be able to actually listen, see what's going on around you, hear things that's going on around you, have an open eye, basically scan a situation, see what's going on. Yes, you're focused on the story, but there's more to the story than just the facts or what people are saying. There is a feel to every story, and you have to hone all your senses. It could be smell, it could be sounds, it can be a feeling. There is always a feeling in any given situation. You have to be able to describe that. And that's what makes the really good stories, being able to describe something in a way, and remember, you have to do it pretty briefly too. You have to be able to describe it nicely, so it creates a picture for your reader, but you can't get too long-winded with what you're writing. And hopefully this lesson gives you a little bit of clarity on how to do that. Know that it's going to take a while to learn how to do this consistently, but you still have to get these first lessons on how to do it. It will come as with anything, it comes with time. All right, so now that we learned about the pyramid, we now have to learn how to break the rules of writing to bring a more expanded, a deeper story. So here we've got it's the expanded pyramid. You have your lead, your bridge, your background, and your body. And let me kind of go into a little bit more detail. We talked about the lead, the 5 W's and the 1 H, and how you can get that lead and do it in a couple of sentences. And also always remember FOCII, FOCII, the fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, and impact. All those are aspects and topics that can help with your lead and the different types of stories. And that the whole point is making sure your readers get as clear a story as possible. All right, so now you've written your lead, so we've gotten past the lead. All right, now we have to bridge it. We use bridges all the time, but in news, we actually, when you see stand up, if it's not at the end, it might be in the middle, and we call it a stand up bridge because it's segueing from one part of a story to another, trying to connect from one part of the story to another. That's what this bridge does. There are a couple of different bridges that you take in the writing of your stories. Now, the first one is the lead cleanup bridge. Basically, the lead cleanup bridge is a way to augment and help and include the aspects of the 5 W's and 1 H that might have not been included within the lead. This is where you would put that, depending on what the story is. this is a way to go from the lead, the bridge, to the other part of the story, which is the background. So if there's any that with the lead cleanup bridge, if there's some aspect of the 5Ws and 1H that you didn't get within the lead, this is where you're putting this. But that's in this specific case. So know there's 3 different types of bridges, and this is one type of bridge to use. Because remember, every time you write, it's going to be a different story, it's going to be a different situation, and one of these 3 types of bridges will help depending on how your lead went. That's the big thing about that. Understand that. The flexibility of writing. Yeah, there's a formula, but it's a flexible formula depending on how that lead of the story was written. And every lead is going to be a little different. So that's probably one of the most important things to understand is when you're making the decision on what bridge. It all depends on what you did with the lead, and it's flexibility. You have formulas, you have plans, but you have to be flexible according to the way the story is being written out and your approach. Another different kind of bridge is the quote bridge. It's simply just putting in a quote that will smoothly transition from that lead to the next part of your background. So you've given the whatever in the lead, the who, what, when, why, where, how, however much you were able to put in there in a good, concise manner. And then there's a quote that you find within the course of your story, or something that was said that can really, once again, bridge the gap between that lead into your background. What's a good way to transition from one point to another? I do that. Been doing that for a long time in TV news, putting in sound bites that this sound bite's going to really work well in what they're saying here to introduce this next part of the story. It's the same with print. You can do the same with print. And when you use a quote bridge, it's supposed to support the lead that you've already written and whatever the main aspects of that lead is. That's the whole point of the quote bridge. The next one is the advance the story bridge. You might not have a great quote or that will bring you over to the next element into the background. You might have actually been able to put in all the 5 W's and 1 H in your lead. So you don't have a good quote, you've done everything you were supposed to do with the lead, so this is the other option, how the advance the story bridge. So what you're going to do here, you can start following the inverted pyramid structure. This is where you start getting deeper in the story. This is where you're kind of segueing into the background of the story. This is where we start putting in a little bit of the meat and the potatoes. Basically, whatever you think is the second most important aspect of this story, this is where you put that. Then the next part is the background. Once you've gotten your lead and once you have your bridge to transition over to the background is where you're giving more information. Any information that you haven't put in here yet, this is where you start putting some context for your readers. This is where you're getting whatever other information that's also important that people have to know about. It supports everything. It's like the proof. It's giving them information to better understand the story, why it's important. It could be people, it could be events, it could be any number of things. Background is a general statement, and this is where you put all that. It says you could get it done in maybe 2 sentences, could be 3 or 4. It all depends on the story. It depends on what the story is, how much background you have, what kind of job you've done up until that, from the lead and the bridge. And once again, as I said before, it's flexible, so you have to take that flexibly. Remember, this is a news story. You're not writing a big long thesis or paper. You have to keep it short. All right, that's why I said maybe 3, maybe 4 sentences. One or 2 might actually do it. Remember, it's a news article. And then you go from the background to the body of the article. This is where you put your indirect quotes, your direct quotes. Remember, your indirect quotes are just paraphrased quotes. Maybe they didn't give you wonderful words strung together, but you can take the basic ideas, and those can, in some ways, set up your direct quotes. That happens a lot. You can set up a quote by teasing what is about to be said, but the important thing is not to kill the quote. A lot of people kill the quote, don't basically say the same thing leading into your quote. Do it in a way that teases it but doesn't take away the heart of what that person is saying. People still do that. Professionals do that quite a bit, especially in television news industry. They do that about a lot of the time. They basically kill the soundbite that's being brought in next by basically saying it in a way to set it up, but repeating themselves. So don't do that. There's a way to write it so you're teasing it, but not killing the soundbite that's coming up. And you're giving them an idea of what is about to be said, but you're not specifically saying that. And you'd be surprised how many people actually do that. And then we don't have a little graphic up here. We've got the body. You've got your lead, your bridge, your background, your body. Now what you got to do is you got to end the story. How do I end the story? You want to wrap it up in a nice bow. You want to nail down the end of it. One of the best ways I've found over the years is a closing quote. It's just like, bang! I've nailed it with the end of this. It wraps everything up in a nice little package, and part of that is how you interview people. And we'll get deeper into interviewing later in the semester, but how to interview people. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes when you're interviewing, you're trying to get information, and sometimes you're interviewing for a way to ask a question in a way that you think you can get a good quote. With a way and one way to do that is to think about, how am I going to end this piece? Now, sometimes it just, the quote comes in a general answer that just happens to work, but sometimes you can ask a question that you think might be a good way to wrap up a piece. I mean, but that's, like I said, be flexible, and it can also give you more to choose from when you're trying to sift through all your information. And then, if you don't have a good quote to end it all, and you might not, there's a simple, by doing a line or two. The examples they gave as just a wrap up paragraph to wrap it up is simple too. A line like, the city council will vote on the matter May 3rd. All money raised at the fair will benefit the Save the Children Fund. A popular one that we use when we're talking about a fire, and especially for a fire, is the Red Cross is helping all those displaced by the fire. Right? That was usually a go-to all the time for the end of a story. So it could be just one line, a couple lines. Depends if you have a good quote. Depends if you don't. If you don't, then you can just go with the simple wrap it up, and because you're looking for that finality to the story, you're looking to end that story. Remember, it's been short, it's been brief, but you still have to try to find some sort of finality to that. There might be more chapters to it, and then in that case, you hint in that way, but you do it in a way that still ends that story, and there may be another chapter coming up. We'll see. Something like something along those lines, that idea, but it still gives a finality to at least that story, or at least what may be just a chapter in a story. You still want your beginning, your middle, and your end. Now, when dealing with this expanded news writing, the new style to bring more depth to your stories, there are criticisms saying, the inverted pyramid, it lacks flow, it sticks too close to the formula, it works for brief little stories. So that's why we need to have another formula or something more to augment how to tell a story, because not all stories are the same, some are deeper. You can still use it. You can still use the pyramid. You just have to tweak it a little bit with these new steps and these new processes that I'm showing you here. You can still always go back to the pyramid. So basically, it's once again being flexible, being able to adapt. That's a lot. That's a lot of what life is, and that's a lot of what journalism is. Because not every story is the same, and you're going to take different approaches, different times, depending on what's been presented to you, what you've found, the situations, the research, the people. It's always different. And that's the biggest thing I can tell you about when you're going out to get a story. It's always different, and you have to be able to adapt to the differences and know that you can't really use a cookie cutter approach every time. You can still use the same functions and use a lot of the rules, but you just have to tweak it a little bit here and there to do the best story you can. Now you got to understand what a big mistake, especially when you first get started, is narrative writing. It's going to be more creative. It lets me be loose, and I don't have to necessarily follow the pyramid, because the pyramid seems too constraining. It's limiting my creativity. No, it's not limiting your creativity, and it's not easier. Because you still have the simple truth is you still have to follow the rules of journalism. Know who you're writing for, of course, your readers, and following all the other rules when you're writing this story. You still have to follow those specific rules. You can't go off the rails and think, it's gonna be much better. You still have to be brief. You still have to be able to communicate in a concise manner. In narrative writing, you're getting a chance to be more descriptive, and you're setting up scenes, and there's a little bit more to it than just facts. Important thing is not to get away from those main tenets of journalism. As part of that writing with the narrative field, one of the best examples of that is an opening segment from the movie Up. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, with Carl and the little boy that they run on an adventure. But at the beginning, he's an old man at that point, but they tell the story of Carl and Ellie, and how as children they met. There's back and forth banter between them before they get to a certain section. As children, telling how they met and setting up the scene for the rest of the story to know who Carl is and his life is. But what this interesting thing about this scene they talk about as being narrative is there weren't any words in that scene. It was all music and the scenes and the action that was going on in there. You could tell what was going on just by the reactions and the shots that you were seeing, but it basically summed up the entire relationship from when they first got married, started dating and got married, to when Ellie passed away in old age, and the struggles and them fighting and living life together. And basically showing you who Carl was up to that point in the story you're about to go into, and the adventure he's about to take, and all the meanings of how much it meant to him, the things in there he was fighting for, how much it meant to him, and you saw why. What did this do? It set up why Carl thinks the way he did, why he's so passionate. You now know. And it was done with no words, it was done with music and visuals. And they did it in a pretty short period of time to set up the rest of that movie. If you want to see that, I have it on the content page. You can watch the entire scene, and it'll give you a good feel. So I recommend you watch that scene. You may have seen it before. Watch it again. Try to analyze it this time.